I want you to be thinking now about the importance of deeper reflection on the ideas that we have. So, someone says that we're going to build a church, we're going to build it in a certain place, we're going to meet at a certain time. We can't just rush in. We've got to reflect on what is going to be the best approach. In order to reflect, we need to gather information, and we can gather information from books, from the internet, from Google Scholar. We can gather information from people. We can do some research. We can gather evidence. And based on this research and evidence, we can then discuss the options and see what is the best strategy for going forward. Too often we can race ahead and do something without reflecting, without gathering the information and the evidence. And so reflective judgment encourages us to gather information and reflect, and then to make sound judgment on what is the decision that is going to be best. We may decide that the idea to develop a church in a certain place may not be the best decision. There may be an alternative that could work much better. I was involved in a school in which we were able to build a primary school, and then we had to make a decision, would we build a high school? And we looked into it. It was scary. To build a high school, you needed money, you needed buildings, and it was so scary. For about 6 months or more, each time we looked at it, we decided it was too difficult and too scary. But in the end, we decided it was important. And so we did a lot of reflection for 6 months, maybe a year or two, before we made the decision. And then we went forward. In that time, we developed a plan and a strategy so that we could safely develop the high school. We had a small building or two that we could use. We had a teacher or two that we could use. And so we could safely start. And then we started with year seven, I think, and then we added year eight and year nine. Unfortunately, over the next 3 years, we were fortunate that as we added more students, the finances built up, things were going well, and it became stronger and stronger. And today we have over 1,500 students, I think, in the college. And so it's now thriving, it's doing well, and it's huge. And so over the time, the school has grown. It's amazing. It's just been blessed. And but we had to take time to reflect and plan, and it was scary making those decisions. But we did all our homework, we collected our evidence. Initially, when you start gathering information, the pre-reflection stage, you don't know much and you can be very confident because you don't know much. We're going to build a church. It's going to be great. You've done no research. You don't know. We're going to start a music group. It's going to be great. You don't know. You're going to give it a go. Um, on the north side of Brisbane, there was a group of boys who started a Christian singing group in a garage. And they said, we're going to build this Christian singing group, and it's going to go really good. So they met in a garage and started playing their musical instruments. And these are the four boys who attended the church that my wife and I went to a couple of times. And they started in a garage practicing. And so that was their band that they started there. But they didn't really know how well it would go. And so they come from just up from us in Mooloolaba in Brisbane, and they thought it would go. In 1985, one of the people there, Peter Furley, He was one of the singers from South Australia, and he gathered his three friends together and they put some songs together and they started singing. And then in uh, a few years later, they had an opportunity to go over to Nashville, Tennessee, and to try their songs over in America. So they went over there and tried it. So initially, they were in Queensland, started in 1985 in a garage singing. And then they had some surfing people and swimming people came along. And then in 1987, they went to the USA and they gave it a try. And then they brought out two music albums. One was called Hell is for Wimps, which is a music album that they put together. And then they put another music album. But all of this was a bit scary because they were just trying it and seeing how well it did. Fortunately, it did very well, and they've become a very famous band, and they're just thriving. But it goes to show you really don't know what could unfold when you start, but if things go well, then it's amazing how well you can go, and they've become a very successful Christian music band. But that's not the way it looked when they were meeting in the garage initially. Um, they didn't have the knowledge, they didn't have everything they needed, but it's grown and grown. Knowledge, we think we know a lot initially, but we don't know so much. We need to grow. Often we look at problems as just simply what's right, what's not wrong. We don't fully understand the complexity of what's involved. Children are like this. They don't fully know everything that's going on. We're after one true answer. Then in high school, we learn some of the complexities. As you're doing your 3 years of study, as you go out next year and do practical work, you realize that it's more complex that's out there. And you reflect more deeply on what is going. You recognize that knowledge is less certain and we need more information. You recognize that knowledge is often quite subjective and different people have different amounts of information. And then as you go further on, you gather more experience, more knowledge, and you begin to have a much greater knowledge of what's going on and you become more skillful in what you're doing. And I pray that over the next 5 and 10 years, that you grow and develop in your knowledge and understanding in many areas that God could lead you into. And then the highest stage, maybe in 5 or 10 years' time, you will have a wealth of knowledge and experience that you'll be able to share with others. But it takes time to develop. Similarly, with emotional intelligence and development. Already you have an understanding of emotions, and each time you experience a disappointment or someone who disagrees with you, emotions go off in your life and you begin to respond to these different emotions. And as you respond to these different emotions, then you're able to share some of this response. And it's good when things go well, but at times you'll feel sad or disappointed or angry, and you'll learn how to respond to these different emotions in more mature ways to better understand what's happening with the emotions, to better understand healthiest ways to respond and work with people. You'll develop greater self-awareness of your own emotional state, greater self-regulation on how to manage your emotions. You'll develop greater empathy with other people's emotions and social relations and the diversity of people that are out there. You'll develop greater understanding of different social groups and different group dynamics. Some people may be very caring and listening. There are other people out there that can be very forceful and they can very strongly disagree. And you need to seek to understand where they're coming from and not be disappointed and hurt by these other reactions, but to develop an understanding of the diversity of responses that are out there. You need to develop relational management skills in which you learn to recognize and understand conflict and ways to best respond with a range of ways, not just one way, but different times in different places. There may be different ways that you will need to respond. At the same time, it's important to keep positive and encouraging. And as we look to God and His good purposes, we can keep positive and encouraging. And I'm reminded as Jesus faced the challenges in his life, which eventually became even more and more challenging, he has much to teach us on how to face challenging situations. At times, we will correct the way we do things. At times, we will work with others towards positive responses. It's important to reflect on emotional triggers. What sets you off emotionally? Are there certain things in your life that trigger annoyance, anger, or a negative response? Take a couple of moments now to write down, just in your own reflection, what are some things that trigger you? What are some things people might say or do that trigger you? Emotional triggers. Even events can sometimes trigger us, can't they? If things don't go so well, how do we respond? And what are some healthy ways to respond? So think about emotional triggers and think about some healthy ways to respond. After you've thought about that, the next point we want to just re-emphasize is listening and what is known as active listening. Active listening. Active listening is a particular approach to listening whereby we are actively thinking about what is going on and how to respond. Some of the ways to actively listen, one is to ask questions. So we're listening to someone, we're attentive to what they're saying, but active listening can involve asking some questions. And often we can ask questions in an encouraging way. That sounds very interesting. Can you tell me more about? Another way to actively listen is to paraphrase. Paraphrase is where you write or say something in your own words, and then you ask, is this what you mean? Or do you mean that? And so if a person says that to grow a church, we need exciting music, and so do you mean up-tempo music with guitars and drums? So I'm paraphrasing what I'm understanding, and that helps to develop a dialogue where we learn. Use positive body language, that is, lean forward, listen, show that you're interested. Use positive dialogue and body language to show that you're interested. Yes, yes, yes. Not yes, yes, but yes, yes. Show empathy. That must have been challenging. You must have felt disappointed. Show empathy. Avoid judgment. Oh, that's dreadful. You should never have done that. Avoid judgment like that. Don't give advice too quickly. It can be best to let other people work through and finish speaking. Don't give advice too quickly. Keep quiet. Evaluate the conversation. I think we've done well here. I think we've learnt something valuable. Thank you for the opportunity today. And at times, listening may not be enough. At times, we may need to develop plans and actions. I've heard what you've said today. Are there some responses that we could take that would be helpful in this situation? Don't just consider listening, consider active responses that can be helped. So, active listening means that we don't just listen, there are certain other things we do, such as ask questions and come up with practical answers. Another important and valuable response is to pause before reacting. So someone's saying something, I'm very disappointed with church today, disappointed with your preaching. You did not quote the Bible very often. Before we speak, react. Pause. Just rest a bit. Yeah. Tell me more. Can be important points that you're raising. Tell me more. And so you listen to them and say, look, I've been excited about what I've been reading in the Bible, and you didn't quote the Bible so much today. And so pause, let them work things through. Don't be so reactive. Learn conflict resolution methods, and we shared some of them before. And one of them we shared was collaboration. So you've raised an important point here. We're not using Bible so much today. What's a way that we could work this through? Perhaps we could use Bible more. Could you bring a Bible reading next week? Just reading a passage out of the Bible. So how can you work with people? Observe emotional patterns. So if you've got 10 people, some might be quiet, too quiet. Some might be speaking too much. And so you might want to think, how can we work with what's happening in the meeting? And so before we start the meeting next time, we might say, look, last time it occurred to me that it would be good to get more and more of everyone's involvement. So today, let's begin not by some people speaking for too long, but let's hear some of the people who've not spoken for a while. So observe the emotional patterns in a meeting. And then ask trusted people for honest feedback. How did our meeting go today? What do you feel worked well? You can learn every week from every meeting. There is something we can learn. Leaders who can't manage their lives, manage their listening, manage their emotions, they create a sense of anxiety, a lack of trust. They create a sense of fear and confusion and instability. Leaders who keep changing or don't understand the dynamics, people aren't settled there. One of the other things that's very important for us is to understand our strengths and our weaknesses. It's important to know your strengths, and you can celebrate your strengths, those things that you do well. And a strengths-based approach is one that recognizes areas that you are good at, and it builds on these. So I encourage you to reflect on and write down strengths that you are good at. And there'll be certain natural talents that you have. And so take note of the natural talents that you have. And so if one of your talents is music, then there are ways to use music. Some preachers will even begin with a bit of music, or at the end of their preaching will bring in a little bit of music, pick up a guitar and say, let's take a few moments to allow God to speak to us now, and then they'll play the guitar. And so make use of your natural talents. And then rather than focusing on the gaps that are needed, and there's some people today, we need to set chairs out. And at the end of the meeting today, we need tea or coffee, something to eat. You, as the leader, don't have to do everything. Put the chairs out, make the tea, coffee, the food. You could look at the other areas around and encourage people to be involved. Think about where your strengths are. Delegate strategically, assign tasks to team members based on their excellence. And I hear you're good at cooking and you enjoy cooking, and people have said there's some great cooking you do. Could you do some of your special biscuits for us? Think about people's special area of expertise. Encourage them in those areas. Build complementary teams. Different individuals and people with diverse skills can at times work together. And so with the music team, someone might mix the sound. Someone might do the guitars and drums. Someone might do the videoing. So bring together the people who are able to contribute together. Think about execution, those things that can happen. So leaders who know how to make things happen. So they're not doing everything, but they are spotting and encouraging people. There are those who influence, those who say, you're good at this, and encourage. There are leaders who can pull together relationships and say, look, let's get together for a coffee, or let's get together to discuss. They bring a team together, they build a team. And then there are strategic thinkers who can plan. Bringing all of these strengths of different people together with your own strengths helps to build and maximize capacity. It increases involvement and brings encouragement. Strengths build people. It reduces burnout because people are operating out of their passions and strengths and natural inclinations. And it accelerates learning because people often learn most about areas that they are interested in. To understand our strengths, it's worth reflecting on how do you communicate in writing, in speaking? What are the strengths in your communication? I know some people who stutter and yet they can still be powerful communicators. I know some who struggle in writing, but they can still be effective communicators. Strengths may still work even if you face challenges. Do you have a strength in organisation? Some people are particularly good at organising things and making them work. Do you have a strength in empathy, in understanding how people feel? Or in creativity, writing a song or doing something creative and dynamic? Do you have a strength in analysis and analytical thinking, or in strategic planning? Or administration? We need people to sit down and work on the computers and laptops and keep the names of people, emails, phone numbers, keep in contact, encourage people. Do you have a strength in visiting people, in teaching people, in mentoring people, or in identifying and solving problems? Leaders should be people who identify and develop strengths within themselves and others and use their strengths in a responsible way without overusing them. Remember, a person may have a strength in making decisions, but they may overuse it and control people too much. They may need to wind that back a bit. A person may have a strength in empathy and caring for people, and they may avoid making hard decisions. They need to wind that back a bit. A person may be very creative, but this can lead to disorganisation, and they need to get some more organised. Some strengths can be grown. Different people can develop different strengths at different rates. Some strengths emerge in different settings where there's different support and opportunities. Think about the settings and opportunities that you have to develop your strengths, or where you might need to go to develop your strengths. As well as developing our strengths, it's important to consider our weaknesses. They are not simply areas of failure, they may be areas that we need to grow in. They may be areas that we need other people's support in. They may be areas that we need to delegate to. And so if there are things that you're not so good at, bring in other people who have abilities and strengths in those areas. Consider getting alongside people who can help and teach you in areas that you're not so good at. Consider getting some coaching in areas or skill training in areas. Or consider delegating and bringing people in to do those things that you're not so good at. Developing teams that can work in areas that you're not so good at. Strong leaders don't try to do everything, to be experts in everything. They recognize that there are important things that they have a passion and an ability for that are important, and that there are ways they can bring in other key people to do other key things. Develop a knowledge of your strengths, a knowledge of your weaknesses, and a capacity to work with people alongside your strengths and weaknesses. Develop relationship skills with others, an ability to understand others, to listen to others, to give attention to others, to understand and have empathy for others. Leaders must explain vision, and to do that, you need to clarify it, to write it down. This is what we're seeking to do. But then you need to try that vision with others and say, we are going to build a church that's going to have an emphasis on music and prayer. So you begin to explain that, and then you clarify it. And the other person says, what do you mean by this? And so explain the vision. Spend time talking through with people to get a better understanding of the vision, the goals that you have. Clarify the expectations. I remember someone said they were going to build a church of 100, and someone said, that's not big enough. Let's build a church of 200. They got very excited. No, let's build a church of 300. No, let's build a church of 400. So they started their first church meeting. Guess how many people showed up? 9 people. So their church started with 9 people. But it grew and it grew, and eventually it reached 100 and 200. So clarify your expectations. May not always go the way you think, but it can go the way it needs to go in order to take some steps along the way towards your eventual goals. Communicate respectfully. We can get very excited. At times we can say, you must give, or whatever, but respect people's boundaries. Adapt your communication style to different age groups, younger children, teenagers, older people. You may need a different communication style. And handle difficult conversations. Today, people showed up late, and this raises some challenges for us. If we're going to be more effective, then we need to go to pull together. And so let's make it our goal next week to all be on time and to pull together on time, to show unity. Share that in a positive way, that we are working together towards a goal. Oh, I'm disappointed with you today. Everyone showed up late. Don't be negative and run it down. You could lose the support that you have already. So these are just some of the leadership skills that we are continuing to reflect on and develop. And then tomorrow, we're going to spend some time writing 1,000 words. And tonight, there won't be a task tonight. That'll be continue, or this afternoon, that'll continue into tomorrow. So you can start work on that this afternoon. We want at least 5 scholars, and you could include 8 or 10 or so. And we want you to develop an integrated framework for ministry leadership. That is, what's a framework for ministry leadership? How do you understand ministry leadership? How do you understand leadership? You could divide leadership up into maybe 5 areas. You could say leadership is about these 5 things. And then you could write 100 words or so on each of those. And then, after doing 800 words, the last 200 words, we want to think about application next year. And you could say, in my hope of leading a youth next year, or women's group next year, or music group, or pastoral or church group next year, I can see that leadership would apply in these areas. I could see that it's going to be important to build a team, and that relationship and communication are going to be important in this. So take about 200 words to write about how you could apply this in the future. And you could even think about more distant future. I have a goal to continue to develop my leadership and ministry skills in the future. You could include that as well. Are there any questions about the task for this afternoon and tomorrow to work on? So we'll take our 10-minute break. So let's catch up in 10 minutes, and thank you each one. I appreciate that.
God.